Okay, so welcome everybody. If you didn't hear me earlier, for some reason, Zoom is logging everyone in as Mark Carter. So if you do not want to be in this hour-long session, feel free to change your name. Ask that you all put yourself on mute as well to make it easier for Colin and his esteemed guest to really articulate what we want to do today. But as you can see, someone asking?
Anyway, we talked about it. You gave me.
All right, whoever is on, let's see. I can mute everyone, which I will do in a second here. But if you don't mind putting yourself on mute, we have a session today, emerging from the pandemic and recession. How can RIM and IG people, professionals like us help? I'm really excited for this session. It's an hour packed with, I'll let Colin get into it, his three esteemed guests. But before we get started, a couple of just quick announcements. Help us help you. Spread the word when you see this message. You see it on LinkedIn, whatever we're doing socially. Spread this message out. Make sure that we have more people so we can actually do a good job really promoting these meetings. Speaking of meetings, my team has a planning meeting next week. You've got some things you want to talk to us about or suggestions for our chapter, please feel free to let anyone know on the board any of those things. I think it's important for us to know what you want. Also, when checking out ARMA New England, check out our webpage. One of the things you'll find that, come on. Wow, sorry. I'm having technical challenges today. So one thing.
Maybe one of the Mark Carters can help.
Yeah. Ask the other Mark Carter to help. Oh, sorry. There we go. We are here to empower this community as an organization. So we are internationally strong, but we're also strong for the chapter. It's a bunch of peers that we have, and there's a tremendous amount of benefits. Go to our website, check out what we're doing. There are a lot of good things happening inside this chapter, a lot of great people on this board pulling things together, and we need your assistance. Also, when you go to the board, the website, you'll notice that we have a chapter donation center for the American Red Cross. That has become our charity of choice. So we're out there doing some work with the Red Cross. Feel free, if you got some extra money and you want to help us out, feel free to put some money in that for the Red Cross. That helps everyone. So without further ado, Colin, I'm going to shut down my screen and I'm going to let you take it from here.
Great. Thank you, Mark, and good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for joining us. Very excited about today's session. Again, emerging from the pandemic and recession, how RIM-IG's professionals can help. Very, very happy to have a great panel joining us today. So we've got Heidi Bogner, Susan Cisco, and Jim Merrifield. I'm going to turn it over to let them introduce themselves, and then we'll start to get into this session. And we'll start with Heidi. Could you introduce yourself first?
Sure. Thank you, Colin. It is my pleasure to join folks today to talk about this important topic, and I'm so glad that I have great panelists with me as well. So for those who don't know me, my name is Heidi Bogner, and I am in the ARMA New England chapter of, the New England chapter of ARMA, and I have been in the Boston chapter before that. I have worked for over a decade in regulated industries, in pharmaceuticals the last decade and a half, but before that in banking, education, things like that. So I got a good taste of records management in pharmaceuticals though, so that's my strength. I have been all over the place in the board for ARMA Boston chapter, the local chapter. There's also the ARMA Education Fund that I was involved with. And I guess that's enough about me. I'm looking forward to sharing on this topic and seeing what questions come up and how it goes.
Great. Thank you, Heidi. Susan, would you like to go next?
Hi, everyone. I'm Susan Cisco. I'm a 30-year veteran of records and information management. I've been a practitioner, a consultant. I've been on the faculty at the University of Texas. I'm an author, so I have a few years under my belt and am delighted to have this opportunity to share. And one of the benefits, the pluses of this pandemic is that a lot of these meetings have gone online. And that's why I'm able to be here today, because I'm sitting in sunny Austin, Texas, and I'm not shoveling snow today. Thanks for inviting me.
That's great. Thanks for rubbing it in, Susan. Jim, want to go next?
Sure. Well, I'm in snowy New England, jealous of Susan. Again, Jim Merrifield. My current role, I'm the Director of Information Governance and Business Intake at Robinson & Cole, a AmLaw 200 firm, primarily based in the Northeast. Been an ARMA member for, I think, 15 years, held roles. I'm a former Connecticut chapter president, been involved on the international level as well. So I'm very excited to see that ARMA Connecticut and Boston have joined forces and joined New England. I know I've been a little disconnected for a while, so thank you to Mark and others for dragging me back in. Really excited getting back together with this group. I think we have a lot to offer one another, and I'm looking forward to the discussion today. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Jim, Susan, Heidi. This is great. So as probably many of you probably participated in our November meeting, where the topic was RIM and IG in times of disruption and acceleration, where we had Julie Colgan and John Azaza sharing, talking about those challenges. So today's session, I think, is sort of a natural, next piece of that. So a recession, a pandemic is certainly a disruption, right? And before we get into it, just wanted to quickly highlight that Susan was kind enough to share a link to a research paper that she did with Access. I believe everyone who signed up for this session got a link to that. If you haven't, let one of the many Mark Carters know, and we'll take care of it. And I highly encourage you to read it. It's very, very good. So again, really on the topic of the pandemic and the recession, I want to focus probably a little bit more on recessions, and just some background info, and then we'll dive into the conversation. So according to the World Bank, there have been 14 global recessions in the last 150 years. The most recent ones, four of them, have happened since the 1980s. There's one in 1982, 1991, 2008, 2009, and the one we're currently in today. Furthermore, the US National Bureau of Economic Research officially declared that the US is in a recession that began in February of 2020. But in 2019, there were a lot of people predicting that we were going to be in a recession. And this is pre-COVID, right? So COVID has certainly accelerated. Again, one of those terms we've discussed in this last year. COVID has certainly accelerated it, but there were a lot of people talking about it. And Gartner in 2019 had a conference where they asked CEOs, CIOs, if the economists are right who are predicting that there will be a recession in 2020, how do you think your organization would respond? Some of the answers were that they would continue to drive forward with digital initiatives and be agile in responding to major challenges that would come up unexpectedly. Others said, we would accelerate our digital initiatives. Others said, we'll analyze, execute, cut, and grow. Another more recent finding that's starting to kind of come into view, and I think some of you may be able to speak to this as well. In 2020, more mature organizations, mature in the perspective of doing a good job of managing and organizing their information, and I think the panel will speak to this. So organizations that do that, where knowledge workers really need access to the critical business information remotely, they've continued to be productive and efficient. So the question is, and what we'll talk a lot about today, is how can we plan and prepare to future-proof our organizations from future disruptions? Okay, does that make sense to everybody? Any questions? Good. I have a question for our group. We'll start with Susan. So the first question is, what challenges have you seen within organizations in response to the pandemic and recession in 2020?
So early in the pandemic, my thoughts turned to records. That's just how I think, records and information. And I was wonder how well organizations are prepared to ingest these new kinds of records that are certain to be flooded into organizations. And this was back in March, and now here it is a year later. So, I was curious about what formats are they going to be? What's the volume going to be? What types of records are there going to be? And so, of course, I searched the internet. I read articles and publications. But one of the things I did is that I signed up for the Johns Hopkins contact tracing course. And this is a very well done course. There's a test, there's a lot of testing. But I think I was really shocked when I actually found out what kinds of questions contact tracers ask. Let me read some of them to you. Who lives in your house with you? With whom have you spent time in the past week? Where have you gone in the past week? How much time did you spend with people in your home and outside your home? What other health conditions do you have? And what were the results from your COVID-19 test? These are super private and confidential information that certainly, I wondered if organizations were actually going to be doing contact tracing. And contact tracing, what I just described, is just one of what I expected to be maybe dozens of kinds of records and information that would be related to the pandemic. So I approached Access and asked them about a research group, and Johnny Sasa and I worked on this together. We recruited 9 industry professionals from 8 different industries, from banking to oil and gas, to consulting firms, to electric transmission companies. These were mature, seasoned professionals, and we worked together over the summer. Understand that all of this, all the information we gathered and analyzed and anything we developed is totally anonymized. These people participated on the promise of anonymity. And honestly, it didn't really matter from whom the information was coming from. We just wanted to know what was going on. And by the way, one of these participants was doing contact tracing. And I know of a couple of more organizations that's kind of surprising to me are doing contact tracing. And to be honest, that may be well because governments have not really been able to step up. The idea was that public health officials would be doing the contact tracing. But with the proliferation of cases and all the problems that we've had, there hasn't been a lot of public contact tracing that I'm aware of. So maybe that's why more organizations are stepping up to do it themselves. And for example, one of our participants was an airline, and they're definitely doing contact tracing. And I also know a couple of more. So we pulled this group of people together over the summer, and to be honest, having this to work on kept me sane because, being isolated at home and trying to figure everything out, I was just so grateful that I was able to come together in this collegial and cooperative environment to sort these things out. And the pandemic that Colin mentioned, the playbook that Colin mentioned earlier, is a result of that work that we did this summer. And I do intend to speak more to that when we get to opportunities. So I think maybe I'll just leave it there for now, Colin, unless you have a follow-up question.
No, I think that's great. Thank you, Susan. Jim, go to you next. Same question. Challenges you've seen at Robinson Cole, maybe some other places, and even if you speak to any of the things that you and the firm maybe have done differently in the last 10, 11 months.
Sure, happy to. So I mean,
pandemic and economic, either or both.
Sure, no, for sure. I mean, I think first and foremost, all of us kind of dealt with this is just working remotely. Now having those of us with kids at home, pets at home, maybe some elderly parents to worry about, and just the pandemic in general. I think that presented enough challenges. But then, along with that, the challenge of still producing to our employer, right? That was another challenge. So I guess speaking specifically to our information governance team, what we set up right away is engagement with meetings. We set up 3 meetings a week, and they weren't long and exhaustive. Most of the meetings centered on just checking in with each team member and just making sure, hey, you okay? Do you need anything? Obviously we talked about work-related things, but just I think having that connection with individuals on the team, I think was very important up front, especially with the pandemic, not having a lot of face-to-face contact, and now people getting, of course, a little stir crazy, right? It was important for us as a firm to stay engaged. So there was a number of firm-wide initiatives that we set up via Zoom, Microsoft Teams, just to continue to foster engagement within the firm. I guess some things we've done differently, I think, in the last few months is, everybody's working more digital, right? And I won't get into any opportunities yet, because I know that's the last question. But just, I think all of us were forced to work digitally, and it, forced us to collaborate more. I think our firm now is more collaborative than probably ever before, across practice groups, across departments, across different people in upper management versus, those on the bottom level. There's really no silos really anymore, and that's kind of, I guess, a nice result of the pandemic. So again, I don't want to get too much into the weeds on this, but if you have a follow-up question, that's fine, or else I can wait till the opportunities or the challenges.
Yeah, no, I think that's great. And it's interesting, right? Because I think what you've shared with us are kind of some of the cultural challenges of working remotely, and sounds like it's gone very well. You mentioned you're meeting 3 times a week with your team. Were there any other things that the firm did, like you said, to sort of break down those silos and work more collaboratively, things you guys kind of figured out along the way?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, it was just kind of, our team wanted to get in front of it, and just, I think we set up a lot of different training sessions with different, or just not really training, but more of an awareness campaign across the firm. Like, hey, here's our services, here's what we can do, here's what we can help. And it's not just within our team, every administrative department across the firm. We set up a SharePoint site up right away to kind of broadcast, here's who you call for what, because I think people were so used to going, down the hallway and knocking on people's doors and said, hey, can you help me? And now with everyone working digitally and, across different office locations all around the country, it was important for us to kind of, again, raise awareness to different services that each team provided. And I think, getting in front of that as a firm, not just, again, as a department, the benefits were tremendous, because I think right now we're probably stronger than ever, collaboratively and working together, and it's nice to look back on the last 9 months and see those results. So.
I have a question for you. How difficult was it for lawyers to work from home?
Yeah, that's a loaded question, right? Especially this being recorded, but that's okay. To be honest with you, I think for the majority of our lawyers, if not all of them, it went smoother than I thought. Now most of our lawyers love working from home, and they love, being connected virtually. I mean, there's still some reasons to go into the office, but we actually implemented Teams and Zoom, I think probably had to be almost 2 years ago. And I don't know, maybe that had something to do with it. We've been pushing a paper light initiative for like the last 5 years. And I think the pandemic kind of pushed it over the finish line, and everybody saw, oh, wow, this is what, the firm has been encouraging us to do for the last 5 years. And now we're so happy that we, even if it was reluctantly at first, they're happy that, they complied, and, our documents are in a document management system and people can, collaborate. So I think, to your question, Susan, which is a very valid one, everybody surprisingly has taken to this new digital world quite nicely.
That's great. I'll add a little color to that. I've been working with some organizations this year to really start to dig in and look at how they've been sort of transitioning to that digital remote workforce, how they're using their tools and technology. And I hear the same things, Jim, right? When you start asking the people who are working remotely, and even folks that have admittedly been working primarily in a paper environment, they've all said that they've adapted pretty quickly and pretty well to working digitally. It's interesting though, as some of the work that I'm doing is we're starting to peel back the covers, right? So people say stuff, they tell us things, they answer questions, but then to see what's actually going on, are they using their systems efficiently? No, generally no. And the other thing that's been interesting, and I still need to dig into this a little bit more, we're looking at volume of electronic content being created and saved to a central repository. There's a dip in 2020. But there's also a dip in 2008, right? So again, kind of, if you think back to, there's maybe a correlation there with the recessions and just a reduction in the volume of business. Maybe, again, I'm not quite sure if that's the answer or not, but it's interesting when you look at the creation, the volume of content over time. There are dips in those periods of time where it's spiking in others. So, just an interesting, just sharing that.
That is very interesting.
Yeah,
I wonder
sure.
if there is that correlation.
Yeah.
For me,
I was curious about disposition. Were you able to look at deletions and disposition at the same time?
Yes, and yeah, that's really not happening. Certainly needs to, but yeah, no, not a lot of that. Just a real, massive push to get people working from home, working electronically. And again, that, to Jim's point, I think generally has gone pretty well from that perspective. Adoption, right? Kind of forced adoption in many ways. But the optimization and utilization of the tools, compliance, disposition, risk, I think those are all things we'll talk about in probably our next question. But before we do, I wanted to go to Heidi, still on the first one. So things that you've seen, as you've been working with different organizations, again, challenges, what people have been doing over the last 10, 11 months in response to the pandemic and economic stuff.
So I started working in a new position, contracting at Ironwood Pharmaceuticals, and that was on March 16th. They shipped me a computer, and I thought, isn't that cute? It's going to be a couple of weeks on, working from home, and then we'll be in. So I think, like a lot of folks, it started as a temporary thought process and then has moved into a more permanent and possibly long-lasting type of situation with working from home. So for me, that company happens to be pushing hard for being just a virtual company. However, I do find there are occasions where I need to print paper. And how do I print paper when I am not able to print on the from the corporate print function, and how do I dispose of content? Luckily, the stuff that I print isn't sensitive, but there are folks, everyone's working from home, so there may be folks that have access to personal identifiable information, or health, kind of like to Susan's point, like there's this private element that is being potentially spread around more than it used to be, because what you were saying about having that dip in the stuff that's being loaded in, I feel like some folks may be circumventing the system and maybe not necessarily reducing, although there would be a reduction. I think, with that COVID mindset, a lot of folks are working differently than they used to. And I think that, though, they're still having to move forward and having the opportunity, like Jim was saying, they set up a lot of things so that you knew exactly who to go to, because you don't have that running down the hall to go see John, who always gives you the answer or something like that. So for me, I was very interested in how it was panning out in the personal lives of folks and what that looked like more.
Excellent. Wanted to just sort of cast it out to the audience. Anyone else, their organizations, things that you've seen or heard, some of the challenges and responses in regards to the last year, basically. Does anyone have anything they'd like to add that was kind of innovative or super challenging? No? Looks like we do have a question. Can presenters speak to their experiences of dealing with security issues surrounding persistent needs for offsite access, such as by general counsel, to older but active paper materials that are too confidential or voluminous to be quickly scanned? Does anyone want to take a crack?
I have a friend in banking who was running into that, and they were actually shipping boxes of material, and that I felt was a little less secure than I would like, because they were using the usual, I don't know if it's FedEx or one of those kind of courier services, as opposed to a tighter chain. So I feel like stuff moving across the continent may occasionally not be as secure as you would like it to be. That being said, I think sometimes in the normal course of business, that's how things were done. And so folks they're still learning that private information is so important to maintain. Even like California's got the strictest rules in the United States, as we know, around the personally identifiable information, but there are a lot of other states now looking at, does that mean that we should include something like that for our citizens in our state. And with stuff crossing state borders, I wonder, and I don't know, this is a question out there, is, I wonder what that will look like going forward, if there won't be that kind of ease of transportation and more of the digitization that folks can use the material with.
Yeah, thanks, Heidi. Jim, I imagine you probably had some experience with that, with some of the attorneys needing access to some physical files that may be offsite or even on-site, and they're remote. And just how do you, some of the security issues around that, how have you all thought about or done things?
Sure. I mean, we haven't really come across anything that we had to retrieve from offsite that was, sensitive or any of that. Like I said before, most of our attorneys are used to, I think our Paperlight initiative helped, 5 years ago. We started to digitize mostly everything. So, and anything day forward, we tried to encourage that, if it's born digital, then it, should die digital, right? So, it's not, obviously, I always use the 80-20 rule, right? 80% is compliance is better than, it's better than nothing. There's always those 20% of times. But yeah, I mean, we haven't really come across, shipping sensitive data offsite, from our storage facilities. A lot of the stuff that's in offsite storage is super old. We haven't really, I think in the last 6 years, I could probably count on, one computer screen, how many boxes we've sent offsite. So I'm thankful that I don't think we have that issue.
Exactly. I think I'll let Susan chime in too, but just sort of what I've seen, and kind of speaks to the earlier point that those organizations, like Jim mentioned, their Paperlight initiative seems to be kind of bearing some fruit here, helping them. Same thing, or flip it, right? The organizations that haven't implemented or developed those policies and systems to optimize their transition to a digital environment, and have still sort of dragging along within the paper world, they've struggled more. The response to that, I think generally, what I've seen is there's been a huge uptick in digitization efforts of legacy content. So those physical files that could be offsite or onsite, just going through again, not just everything, although some organizations maybe think that way, but they really shouldn't. It should be a targeted approach to what materials that are currently maybe offsite or onsite, less available, and converting them digitally. Anyone else want to chime in on that? Nope.
In the international space in banking, I have another friend who they are still, the governments in other countries are still expecting wet signatures on some documentation, but they scan things before they send it in hopes that, won't get lost or whatever. The stuff that they're dealing with is more, less about personal identification, but the overall, how is someone voting in a particular company? That type of information is tracked. But I think the good news is, although the world is not yet digital, that we're taking steps to, scan it at least on our end in case something should happen, and then be able to move it forward.
Great, thank you, Heidi. So we definitely want to leave some time for questions. So with that in mind, our next two questions, I'm going to sort of combine them. So the next two questions, and again, thinking of, let's hope there's never going to be another pandemic in ever, never mind our lifetimes, but ever. But we know that there are going to be recessions, right? It's something that happens, and those are again disruptions. So thinking ahead, what challenges and opportunities do you think there are as we look forward to the next disruption? What do you think organizations should be thinking about? I'll come back and start with Susan again.
Okay. Well, I'm going to talk about those pandemic records again, because what we learned in this research group is, as we got to the end of the process, we realized that ingesting record types, be they pandemic or whatever, the process is the same. So I think that although I'm specifically going to speak to pandemic related records, it really can apply to any new records coming into the organization. So with our research group, what we did first was we started by identifying what are the records. And I had culled about 25 different record types based on what I'd read, what I'd heard, my contact tracing course. And then at our very first meeting with the industry professionals, they went back to their organizations to cull more record types. And in the end, we identified 41 unique types of records and information that were related to the pandemic. Once we did that, we went through a process of identifying the risks and the concerns that we had about each of those 41 record types, so that we could kind of rate them by risk and value. So for example, anything with PII or PHI was much higher risk and higher value than, say, one of the 41 types were cleaning logs, for example, PPE acquisition, a PPE distribution. And so there was a ranking of the 41 by risk and value. Then once we did that, we began the process, and actually Johnny Saza headed up the legal analysis of these 41 types. And so not only do you get the types, you also get the recommended retention periods for those 41 types. Now, it's based on federal law and California. And certainly many of you operate maybe in all 50 states or only some portion. But at least at this point, as Heidi mentioned, California is the highest bar, certainly for security, as it is for retention as well. So we're saying these are recommended and probably will be fine for most organizations, but your footprint in terms of states might make a difference. So when you get this playbook, what we wanted to do, we wanted to empower individuals and organizations. We wanted to give them a playbook so that they could take this thing and they could be proactive in reaching out to members of the organization and get out in front of these records, because there's going to be, and we thought by the end of the summer, it would have kind of calmed down, which wasn't true at all. There's more pandemic than ever, which means more records than ever. And so what we would recommend as a process is to take that list of our 41, go out into your organization, speaking with various individuals, and cull that down to what's pertinent to your organization. And contact tracing is a good example. Many of your organizations won't do that, but many of you will. So just tick off down the list, which of the 41 apply to you. Then begin, and also, interestingly, they're all over the organization. The majority, a third, I think, were in human resources, but otherwise they're all across the organization, their facilities, their administration, their legal. Just think about all your contracts have to be with service providers, may have to be updated. There's just a lot involved. And so you can begin having discussions based on certain record types, go get small groups together and begin looking at the privacy and security risks. Begin looking at the value and what's the format. Frankly, I thought most COVID records would be digital, and I was wrong. That's not true at all. For example, my cousin's in the National Guard, and they were doing COVID testing, and they were asking every single person to fill out a piece of paper. And also vaccination records. Sometimes those are paper too. I think maybe you can get it digitally, but I think right now the record is paper. So we've got to be prepared for all those different types. So start the discussions within the various departments, and then look at the retention periods we've recommended for the list that you culled down, and then start working with legal to say if these are going to be satisfactory or not, or do we need to retain them for some other longer period of time for some business requirements. And so we see this as a tool. And again, this could be a model, not just for COVID, but for other kinds of disruptions that come along. And so we are hoping that the opportunity is for information governance professionals to be empowered to be more proactive about this and start the discussions rather than wait till the onslaught pours down on you and nobody's quite sure what to do.
Yeah, I think that's a fantastic thing for everyone to be thinking about. I haven't heard anyone else really thinking about it yet, so it's important. What are your thoughts, Jim? Challenges, opportunities lying ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I just think that's unbelievable what Susan and John and team have put together as a resource. I mean, it's just very forward thinking, innovative, and it's such a testament to the advantage of being involved in these groups, right? To hear this information come out, and because we know all of us read our emails every day, right? So I mean, again, I think just to focus on one word, empowerment, that Susan mentioned, I think right now for information governance professionals, in our organization, the challenge is to stay relevant, and to show impact to the organization. It's something that's near and dear to me. I think there's some some of my coworkers on this call, and they've known that the last 3 or 4 years we've kind of reinvented ourselves, at the firm, and I think we're in a better position now for it to serve the firm. It's gone are the days of the paper records office clerk. I think they're still needed. Don't get me wrong. I mean, listen, paper will never go away, right? There's always going to be, in a law firm environment, there's always going to be practice groups that are paper intensive, and in a corporation, there's always going to be that need for paper. But by and large, I think, the skill set of the new age or the modern IG professional, whatever we want to call it, I think it's our time to really show to add value, to the organization. The challenge is going to be, getting a seat at the table, and being proactive, as Susan stated, identifying opportunities within our organizations that we can show impact. One of those opportunities, I think, in all of our organizations is the idea of space, right? I mean, every single C-level person is looking at space and how we can better utilize office space, save on the bottom line. And I think us as, information governance professionals can work collaboratively across different business units to really show value in that area, to save some cost. I think we've always been looked at as the compliance professionals that always put a bottleneck, in the process. And I think that is true. We want to make sure that the firm and the organization complies with, client demands and firm agreements. But I think there's also initiatives that we can position ourselves to really show that we're going to add value and, better improve business processes and efficiencies. And again, that's just one of them with, space savings. So.
Yeah, great point. Heidi, you want to add anything to that?
On the recession side too, as more of the gig economy comes into play and you see a lot of reductions in workforce where folks are stably stuffing that stuff in their one corner and building up. I think that the electronic, the way that we can help a lot is helping with the tagging and the taxonomies. I think are two very big issues that a lot of folks haven't thought of in the past, particularly around unstructured data. So structured data is a lot easier to find, but unstructured data is the stuff that folks are often trying to remember the blah, blah, blah that happened, or, you know, trying to figure out which end is up. I think that tagging and the taxonomy is where we can really add some value as well. You know, so the proactivity and getting ahead of it, as Susan mentioned.
I think that's a great point, right? Because you know, going back to that Gartner question that they asked of the executives, and their response being that the you know, if there was going to be a recession in 2020, what would they do? And they say, yeah, we're pushing forward even harder with our digital initiatives and transformation. And a lot of that, yeah, I didn't share this part, but if you, the next layer of that is, you know, what is that? What are those things? And high on that list is, you know, AI and automation. So a great opportunity for folks in, you know, professionals in our space to get involved in those challenges and help solve them. Taxonomy, policies, disposition, just general organization of that data is a great opportunity. The one, you know, Susan's playbook, I think too. Right? Again, I don't think a lot of organizations are thinking about this, but that's a potential likely change, addition, enhancement to any organization's retention schedules, right? Because these are new records that people probably didn't have before. And there are unique retention requirements. There's unique risk if we don't manage those correctly. So I think all this is very relevant. You know, and like I said, to Jim's point, it's imperative, I think, for folks in our group to get ahead of these things as much as we can. And earlier, you know, I talked about, you know, kind of what I'm seeing and hearing people say about moving and working more electronically, more digitally, and the fact that they're not likely, you know, doing that as well as they could or should. It's a great opportunity to sort of dust off, update any policies, you know, MIG policies you may have, looking at that technology, working with IT and information security, and, you know, getting a seat at the table there, and how we can help, again, help manage risk, improve compliance, all those things.
Colin, I wanted to make a comment, a response to what you said about the pandemic records. Of the 41 types we identified, 31 could fit into most retention schedules, which was which kind of lowers the risk of the unknown. And in the end, we only created 4 new record series. There were 2 for contact tracing, 1 for positive and 1 for negative, because the retention periods were different. And then 2 for health information, like biometric information. And we had to divide those 2 up into visitor and third party and employee, again, because the retention requirements are different. So the good news is that, but I have to say that we didn't really talk about vaccine records back in the summer. You know, it was just like this dream that was like, oh my gosh, wouldn't it be great if? And so we don't have vaccine records in our 41. So we need to add vaccine records. So this is not a finite list. It's going to keep growing, but sure is a good starting place. And we're going to get the band back together in a month or so, and we're going to assess it. We know we've got vaccine records that we need to address, and there may be other records, but of the 41, 31 of them could fit into existing categories like cleaning logs and visitor logs and that kind of thing. So that was some good news we got out of the project.
That is good news. So I want to open it up to questions from the audience.
Hey, Colin, there are some questions in the chat to everybody, if you want to read right from them. Sarah started it off by asking, about experience on security issues surrounding persistence need for offsite access, which I think you might have answered.
Yeah, we did talk about that.
Okay. Jeannie Evans did ask, do any companies have any guidelines for types of shredders for workers to use at home for work-related files that are confidential?
So I'll we talked about this on our panel prep call. So it's a good question. It's a good topic. So I'll share what I've learned from working with my clients. People are doing that, right? They're printing documents. They're printing stuff at home, and some people are doing a lot of it. So when I ask the question to try and, what are people doing? I've heard a variety of answers. Some folks have told me, and they've showed me, oh, I've got 15, 20 boxes of documents that I've printed since March, and they're just sitting here. Some people say, well, on Saturdays I go and I feed my little home shredder, and spend a few hours doing that. Good times. Some folks are bringing their stuff to like a Staples. Some people are driving in the office. It's a whole. Some people alarmingly have said, I just put them in my kitchen wastebasket. And as I've been on these calls and hearing this, and hearing from a lot of people, I've been on calls with risk management and general counsels, and they're hearing this stuff and their eyes are bugging out of their heads. Oh my God, this is a huge problem. We need to deal with it. So there are different approaches, solutions to, but I think it's evolving, right? Because the awareness of the issue has been, I think, generally low. We need to help escalate it. So again, it's another opportunity for folks like us to be bringing this to the right levels within our organizations and our end clients, and bring solutions to them. So I'm not sure. I've heard some clients that have thought about, providing, letting people expense home shredders and trying to come up with recommendations for that. Generally, what I've heard is that falls down. And any organizations that have even tried it just doesn't work well. It's not efficient, not cost effective. So they're looking for other solutions. That's what I'm hearing.
John had a good question on top of that. Addition of guidelines for printing at home and saving electronic documents, right? Especially for law firms. What about not even printing it type thing? I think is what John's asking.
Anyone want to take that? Jim?
Yeah, I can speak to that. Listen, people, unless you put a GUI in place security-wise, I think, and prevent people from printing at home, people are always going to print right at home if they have the option. Unfortunately, right? So I think like most organizations, forcing people to designate the electronic electronic copy as the official record, that's our motto. I think people are always going to have convenience copies of things. And to your point, Colin, I think it's definitely with every organization. I don't think we've quite figured out the home shredding of paper yet. If anybody has figured that out, I would love to have an offline conversation with you. But there are, I think, some business partners, in our networks that we all know that, I've gotten a bunch of emails and phone calls about offering, residential shredding and pickups and stuff like that. So I think there'll probably be more to come, I think, in our space on that topic. But anyway, we can kind of work with our business partners to, give them maybe the intel they need to create a service that works. I think that would be beneficial, talking about getting ahead of things, maybe working with our business partners and creating an offering.
Rumor has it, Chris Bednar bought a van recently and drives around and does shredding at people's homes.
Nice. Chris, give me a call.
I play a tune while we go around the town.
Nice. Excellent.
People go running after it like the ice cream truck.
Yeah, no, actually, Colin, since you pointed me out, I have been in touch with Iron Mountain about how they do this and the services that they have. So they're an example of a vendor that does provide, trips around the suburbs to pick up boxes for shredding, but that's at this point is very expensive to do it from on an individual level. So the Staples idea, the UPS store, that kind of thing is probably the right answer going forward. But it's definitely something that we at Bain have been thinking about what to tell our employees. Do you just soak it? You soak it in water, or you put it in your fire pit? And personally, I chop mine up and I put it into 4 different trash cans. But I don't print out much anyway.
There you go. Yeah, I mean, I think like printers and scanners, I think most people just have their own, I don't know, my knowledge, most people have their own shred. I mean, whether it's a cross cut or the appropriate shredder, I think most people have a shredder of some sort, in their home office, I would think.
I think Jesse made a good point in his chat. And by the way, this great chat. Thank you very much. So a lot of repositories allow for disabling printers at the document user folder, etc. I think that's a great point, but that's obviously a corporate culture that has to happen. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of great discussion on this point alone, which is awesome.
But I will point out that having kind of that environment where I can't print from my computer at work, at home, I have gone around and, had to take a picture on the screen to get what I needed or things like that. So people will circumvent it. And I know that there are disclosure agreements that folks sign. And then also I was thinking, as you were talking about the getting rid of material, that the medical supply reps, like the ones that are going around to the doctors with their portfolios of what products we're selling. I've seen in the industry that those folks have had to sign waivers saying, yes, I have destroyed every copy, or I am no longer in possession of these copies that I have of the marketing material, because it has to be the specific current version that they're showing folks. And I was thinking, I don't know how they agree to get rid of it. They're given some guidelines I've seen, but I haven't seen a spelled out particular, you must take it to shred here or something, it must be cross-cut shredder or something. I haven't seen that level of detail, but I have seen sign-offs, which at least brings a little awareness to folks. I don't know for what it's worth, but it's out there.
Excellent. Anyone else? Any other questions, thoughts? Thanks for the good chat. No? All right. Well, thanks everyone. Thanks to our panel. Really appreciate it. Heidi, Susan, Jim, thank you so much for sharing your great ideas. Join us next month. I forget the date. It's February 24th. I believe our topic is going to be around information security, privacy. More to come on that, so stay tuned. And again, if you can, check out our Red Cross donation site. Contribute if you can. Donate blood if you can too. And again, thanks everyone. Stay safe.
Thanks, John.
Boom.
Thanks,
Thank
Colin.
you. Bye, everybody.
Bye. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thanks.